that stretches across the Commonwealth. Uniting us under a bond of common citizenship, Warren County has flourished under a talented leadership and dedication of its citizens throughout its history, embodying Pennsylvania's lasting commitment to excellence in community life. Since its founding, the Warren County Historical Society has admirably carried out its mission to collect and tell the stories that have shaped the region's past and present, and continue to shape the future. One of those stories, the life of Warren County native Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson, will be honored here this evening. On behalf of all Pennsylvanians, I extend my sincere appreciation to the past and present members of the three organizations responsible for this evening's program and for their many contributions to the people of our Commonwealth. I wish everyone an enjoyable evening and much success in the years to come. Sincerely, Thomas Corbett, Governor of Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
I want to thank the sponsors who really, without them, this would not happen tonight. Century 21 with Tom and Michelle Turner, D&S Glass, E. Austin and Son, Faulkner Printing and Design, the Warren County Historical Society, and Michelle Gray. I've got to mention her name 3 times. That's the contract. Michelle. Pennsylvania Humanities Council, Schaffner Knight Minna Company, UBS Financial Services, Chautauqua Lake Advisors with Jake Keener, the Warren County School District, Kingsview Paving, the estate of Samuel Bonavita, and Russell Veterinary Hospital. I want to thank them all, and let's give them a hand for making that. A bonus. We're here to honor the legacy of Robert H. Jackson, and as you know, he's your guy. When I say yours, he's a Warren County individual. And as we've learned about the history of Justice Robert H. Jackson, he never forgot. He never forgot Warren County, Pennsylvania. Not only did he was born here, and I see this good person right over there, who did so much of Spring Creek Township, but wonderful things, Spring Creek Township. He would come back, he would fish, he would hunt. There are many stories, including the one where President Roosevelt was trying to find him, and they had to go through the general store to find Justice Jackson was out fishing in Spring Creek. But he never forgot, and in fact, some of his family members are in fact buried in Spring Creek Township, including his daughter, Mary. But also here today, brought to my attention, Phyllis Mickelson Carlberg, right here, from Sugar Grove. And just a few minutes earlier, gave to me something which I'm going to read because I just think it tells so much about Robert H. Jackson and his interest and love. Now, as I mentioned, Attorney General, Solicitor General, Justice of the Supreme Court. And in 1940, Phyllis wrote a letter to then Attorney General Robert H. Jackson, asking a series of questions. I believe there were 6 of them, questions. And here's his response. He paused as Attorney General. Now this is 1940. This is during the time of World War II had commenced. We were on the fringes of it. Ironically, in April of 1940, when he wrote this letter, the whole concept of the exchange for the bases, for carrier, in a very important time period, which Franklin Roosevelt decided he was going to make that exchange. And he was going to make that exchange without the consent of the executive, or of Congress, based on an opinion of Warren's Attorney General, Robert H. Jackson. I don't know the exact date, but I think it's April of 1940. So this is the time. So while he's dealing with this world issue, he writes a letter. Dear Phyllis, I am sorry that I am so far away that our interview has to be conducted by correspondence, but I will try to answer your questions. I went to grade and high school at Frewsburg and then to Jamestown High School. I then went to Albany Law School and mostly to the school known as the School of Hard Knocks. The subjects that interest me most are hard to describe because I was interested in all of the subjects that I took, but probably history and English held the greatest charm for me. I certainly believe that high school training has a definite bearing on one's future. In fact, in the complicated modern world, I do not see how any less than this would equip one to understand what is going on about him. Your fourth question is a little difficult to answer. I do not believe American youth should become excited over isms. But of course, doctrines such as communism or fascism, backed by powerful international organizations, may have an important bearing on their lives. I'm sending you a speech to the American Youth Congress, which I think gives you my views on that subject. Your fifth and sixth questions as to the war call for prophecy, and I'm far from a prophet. I hope and believe that the United States will not be involved. At the same time, I was confident that the Scandinavian countries would not become involved, but their beautiful lands have been borrowed as the scenes for the fight without their permission. He was a prophet. With best wishes to your father and mother and to you, sincerely yours, Robert H. Jackson. I think that's a remarkable letter. I think that's terrific that you took the time to write, because that's wonderful.
Boggles my mind that you took the time out for a little country girl.
Well, you took the time as a little country girl to write him. He took the time to remember somebody from our neck of the woods. I think that's remarkable. And thank you for sharing this, and we're going to make a copy and give this. We'll get this back to you, but we'll make a copy. Our speaker, and we're honored on many fronts to have David Crane be our speaker today. David Crane is a professor of practice at Syracuse University College of Law, where he also earned his Juris Doctor degree. He teaches international criminal law, international law, and national security, as well as the laws of armed conflict. However, this is why he's here today. In 2002, he was appointed chief prosecutor of the Special Court for Sierra Leone by then Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan. Through 2005, Professor Crane prosecuted those who bore the greatest responsibility for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and other serious violations of international human rights committed during the Civil War in Sierra Leone during the 1990s. He was the first, I'm going to repeat this, he was the first American chief prosecutor at an international war crimes tribunal since Justice Robert H. Jackson at Nuremberg in 1945. David's a member of the Robert H. Jackson Center Board of Directors. He's received awards. It's unbelievable. It continues and continues and continues. But what's critical for us to know today, that David, as chief prosecutor at the tribunal in Sierra Leone, was the person who conceived and wrote up the indictment against then Liberian President Charles Taylor. Now, some of you may be watching, and maybe hopefully watching closely, and if you aren't, go Google it tonight. Follow it, because the Charles Taylor case is ongoing. The prosecution has concluded, the defense has concluded, and on Tuesday, the prosecution commenced its closing arguments. David, as the chief founding prosecutor, was invited to go to The Hague to witness something which he started. Can you imagine? It's our David Crane indictment against a president, sitting president, who in turn was served the indictment, who in turn left Liberia, went to Nigeria. There he sought safe haven. Subsequently, through a change of government in Nigeria, he was extradited, arrested, taken to The Hague, tried, and the trial is now concluding. David was given that opportunity to go and be part of that. He chose instead to be with us. And I'm honored that David Crane, who is a part of history, part of the continuum of Robert Jackson, our Robert Jackson, is here today and I'm just honored that he'll be sharing some thoughts. So without any further ado, Professor David Kramer.
I always get excited when I come into a courtroom and sit in one of those chairs. I have this urge to plead something. So if I start pleading, just bear with me. It is a great pleasure to be here. Once again, I sense my hero, Robert Jackson, standing next to me. And at this wonderful reception that we had before this talk, I kind of mentioned to some of the folks here, really, Robert Jackson was with me throughout many parts of my investigating and prosecuting several individuals, to include Charles Taylor. But again, it's a special moment in a lawyer's life, and an honor and a privilege, actually, because one never trains to be a chief prosecutor of an international war crimes tribunal. But you know, as I was getting ready to, and was writing my opening statement, took 13 drafts, and I kept all of them, which Greg is very pleased with that, because most of my papers will be donated to the Robert Jackson Center. We'll talk more about prosecutors today and the association with Robert Jackson and the center. But it was an amazing moment to when you sit in a courtroom, not as nice as this, I might add, but in a courtroom that was built by the people of Sierra Leone to prosecute those who bore the greatest responsibility. To be sitting in a chair very much like this, wearing your robes. I don't have any pictures, but in the modern international tribunals, you wear a black robe with a charbot. I look very, very spiffy there. It's kind of against our tradition. But sitting in the courtroom, and the tribunal comes in, 3 judges, wearing their ceremonial robes, and the courtroom with plate glass, bulletproof glass behind you is filled. The world's press is there. It's being broadcast live throughout the world. People of Sierra Leone who don't have television, of course, it's being broadcast by BBC around the country. You have a little bit of weight on your shoulders. I'm sure that Robert Jackson felt that same weight, but it still gives me chills to tell you this, is that when the chief judge turned to me and said, "Mr. Prosecutor, your opening statement." And this is a moment where a prosecutor isn't telling the judges what took place. They kind of have a sense of what has happened. I mean, obviously, they didn't fall off the turnip truck, plus there's a lot of motion practice going on. So they have a sense. What you do in an opening statement, and I'm sure Robert Jackson did the same thing, is you want to tell a story to the people of the world of why we are here, why we are doing this. And also, and this is just as important, in fact, very important, you are the voice of the victims of the horror that took place in Europe or in West Africa. It doesn't matter, because the pain and suffering is just the same. And so you have an obligation to seek justice and to tell the world their story, because they have disappeared into the sands of time. And so when you walk up to that podium, it looks just like this, and you open your statement and you put your hands just like this. I actually felt the great man's hand on my left shoulder as I began. Your Honors, good morning. And then I began to give my opening statement. Now, when I was giving my opening statement, I only gave half the statement, the general allegations, the general gravamen of the crimes. And then I offered one of my Sierra Leonean colleagues, because this was in Sierra Leone, this was a horror that took place in Sierra Leone, the honor of giving the rest of the specific allegations against the individuals, the leadership of the Civil Defense Force in this particular case, and allowed him, Sierra Leonean, seeing a Sierra Leonean barrister, represent them. And I think that that's very, very important. We'll talk a little bit about politics as well, because it's very much part of being a chief prosecutor, whether you're at Nuremberg or whether you are in Sierra Leone. So I just want to leave you with that thought, because again, the spirit of Robert Jackson continues. It started here, literally, physically, in Warren County, Pennsylvania, but it worked its way through up north to Jamestown, New York, and then spread towards Albany, and then down to Washington, D.C. He was a remarkable man. He was, in my mind, the quintessential American lawyer. He is why we become lawyers. He is why we cherish the law. He is why we are American. Here he is, Warren County, Jamestown, New York, and he becomes the Solicitor General, the Attorney General of the United States. And one would probably say that's pretty good. I'll take it. But then he becomes an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. And then, to the detriment of his career, because he is concerned about this, because what he wants to be, and you've read the history, he wants to become the Chief Justice of the United States. And he was actually pretty much the front runner. And yet, he was called upon by Harry Truman to become the Chief American Prosecutor at the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. That's a special moment, because I had that special moment as well. I almost blew it off because I didn't think they were serious. But I'll tell you that story a little bit later. Because I'm going to tell you some stories. I think that that's the important part of this evening, is the stories about all of this. The things that you don't read about, but yet mean something about the spirit of Nuremberg and Robert Jackson. But because he took the job, because he went over there, and really this had never been done before in history. People were saying, why are you doing this? And the people that went over there to work for them saying, why are you doing this? This is going to end your career. This is a kangaroo court. This is victor's justice. They went. Some of them as young as 26. My good friend of many people at the Robert Jackson Center, Henry T. King, was a 26-year-old Yale graduate who went over there and did his duty. But people were pleading with him. He had just joined a large Wall Street firm, but he went there because he had this sense that it's the right thing to do. It's why we become lawyers. But going back to why I think Robert Jackson is the quintessential American lawyer. Humble beginnings, hard work, smarts, took whatever he had, God-given abilities, and just worked hard. Raised a wonderful family in western New York, and then also had the courage to take opportunities. And you all know these opportunities. Sometimes you take them, and sometimes you don't, and you move forward. But it's always a challenge when you're offered an opportunity and you look inside the door and it's completely black and you have no idea when you step through that door what's going to happen. That takes a lot of courage, and I'm sure all of you have been in those situations. But Robert H. Jackson, Warren County, Pennsylvania, always stepped through that darkened door and moved forward. That's so uniquely American. That is so uniquely American. And not only did he step through the door, but he took whatever that situation was in that darkened room, forgive me for my bad analogies, but he made something of it. And he made himself better, and he made, most importantly, our country, our law, and mankind better for it. And that's just an incredible, incredible legacy in and of itself. Had he never been the chief American prosecutor at Nuremberg, it doesn't matter what an incredible person that he was. He's a great role model for law students who are sitting there scratching their head going, in the middle of winter in Syracuse, New York, bogged down, particularly in the second year when you're halfway through, so there's no light at the end of the tunnel. He is a great role model, as if you work hard, saw the wood in front of you, good things will happen to you because you're going to work hard and represent your client in whatever capacity that may be. We're not all going to be chief prosecutors. I didn't ask for it. Robert Jackson didn't ask for it. In fact, all my colleagues, and there's only 12 of us in this very small fraternity from Nuremberg all the way to the International Criminal Court, none of us asked for those jobs. They were offered to us, just like Robert Jackson. And there was every opportunity in the world. Most of us were successful in what we were already doing. But to sit there and literally end your current career, get on an airplane and fly off somewhere halfway around the world with 3 suitcases, your special assistant and your chief of investigations in a part of a world that that is just literally hell on earth, away from your family, that takes a little bit of courage. And all of my colleagues, be they from Rwanda, Yugoslavia, Cambodia, also did those kind of things. But it was Robert Jackson's example, because he was an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. I think that's pretty good enough in my book. In the legal profession, that's what we call a gold star. All right. Why would he leave Washington and his family to go off to Nuremberg, Germany, a completely destroyed part of the world? It was, like in Sierra Leone, hell on earth. There was nothing standing. 90% of that city had been destroyed. Just coincidentally, the courtroom was largely undamaged. Why do Americans step up and take the challenge? That's because that's what we do. We are Americans. We always step up to the challenge. It's ingrained in our DNA from Massachusetts and the colony all the way forward. We are always given challenges and we always step up. So that's why I went to West Africa. I can't explain to you why, other than the fact that I considered it a privilege, and that's what Robert Jackson did as well. Now let me tell you this kind of funny story, because a lot of the students and obviously the public, well, how did you get this job? They're always asking, how do I get to be a chief prosecutor? You know, give me the career path. Give me the courses I need to take. And I tell them, well, you can't. Like anything in life, saw the wood in front of you. Just be very good at what you do. And as I always tell them, good things happen to good people. And you know that. But one night, 27 August 2001, at 7 o'clock, my wife and I was the Deputy Inspector General of the Department of Defense, kind of an important job, full-time job, so to speak. My wife had a similar type of career in the Defense Intelligence Agency. And so, for some reason, we were home early, 7 o'clock. We were actually going to have dinner together. It's kind of a neat thing. Our children are grown. So it was just the two of us and our two little kitty cats. And we're just getting ready to settle down. Looked like a nice spaghetti with a very nice Chianti. And the phone rings. And of course, I'm thinking it's a creditor. You know, or not a creditor, but a credit card. So I'm grumbling to myself. It's not a creditor. That's another story. Yeah. It's a credit card. I'm thinking I'm grumbling to myself. So I pick up the phone and go, hello, Mr. Crane? And I said, yes. Thinking, well, yeah, I'm so-and-so, and would you like a credit card? This is so-and-so from the National Security Council at the White House, and I was just wondering, do you have a few minutes? Looking over at the dinner that's right on the table. My wife is finishing things up and putting the salad on and stuff, and I said, I have a few minutes. He goes, well, this is so-and-so from the National Security Council at the White House, and we were just wondering if you would be interested in being the United States nominee to be the chief prosecutor of the new War Crimes Tribunal in West Africa. It's probably the same reaction that probably Robert Jackson had when he got a call from the White House. Different president. This was George Bush, Harry Truman. I said, sure, I would be interested in looking at my dinner. Obviously, you want to chat with me a little bit later, but yeah, I would be interested. And kind of chuckling to myself, and promptly hung up. And Judy goes, who was that? And I go, well, it was the White House. They're interested and want to know if I wanted to be the prosecutor in West Africa. And she just starts laughing. You're not going to get that. I said, I know. She goes, the whole world is mad at America right now because they just pulled out of the Rome Statute and created the International Criminal Court. And so they're not going to give an American a position like this. And I go, I know. And she goes, and you're a Democrat, and he's a Republican. And I go, I know. So we're both just laughing. We just think that this is hilarious. So we just sit down, and by the way, the Chianti was nice, and so was the spaghetti, and we promptly forgot about it. Well, of course, 2 weeks later, 2 planes hit the towers, and 1 plane hit the Pentagon where we worked, and we lost some friends, and we were at war, and the paradigm changed. And all I forgot about it. Well, at the end of September, though, a phone rings, and it's the State Department. Mr. Crane? Yes? We're wondering if you could come over. We'd like for you to send a resume, but we're going to submit your name to be the American nominee to be the chief prosecutor. And I go, you were serious about that? Literally, I said that. And the guy kind of was taken aback. I said, look, I apologize for being flippant. I said, but, we're busy. Is this a serious nomination, or am I going to be, as you always do in the political world, am I the throwaway? Oh, no, sir, this is a serious nomination. I said, okay, I'll send you my resume. And so, again, I don't want to belabor the point, and I don't think Robert Jackson was that flippant during his time, but he might have been. The point is that I didn't ask for it. In fact, I was a reluctant candidate all the way through the nomination process, a little different than Robert Jackson, because we have the United Nations paradigm, don't we? So I had to go to the Security Council and be interviewed by ambassadors and diplomats, some of which hated us, some of which asked me, what right do you have to be the chief prosecutor? Ambassador, I don't have any right to be the chief prosecutor. I think I could do it, but I didn't ask for this job. I stepped forward, but I was like, what? Anyway, so it was very tiring, frankly, at moments. But you persevere. Then I get notes that, well, the Australian's going to get it, and don't worry about it. And one time I even had a phone call from the State Department that says, it looks like the Australian, so I took my file and put it at the bottom drawer in my office, and I called my wife and said, looks like it's going to be the Australian, and she goes, great, because I'm leaving for 3 years if I get this. And so nothing happens, and then one morning, and the reason I'm belaboring this, because I really want to tell you the human side of all of this. This is really important. I'm not going to give you a law lecture, though I have this urge to do it. But on the 11th of April, I get this phone call from the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs going, do you have your internet on? You had internet in those days. I go, yeah. He goes, I'm reading a story here, Reuters, that you've just been selected to be the chief prosecutor. And I went, what? And I goes, no. He goes, no. He says, is congratulations in effect? He goes, I'm about to go tell the Secretary of Defense. I go, I don't know, because I didn't know. I literally hung up the phone, and it rang again. And it's Hans Corell, the Undersecretary General for Legal Affairs, in his very Swedish voice. David, I'm so sorry, but the word got out. Reuters broke the news last night, and we wanted to formally tell you, I'm walking downstairs, this is 11:30 in the morning, the noon event announcing that you're going to be the chief prosecutor. Will you accept it? Throughout this 6 months, I'm always 2 steps behind this. I mean, I can't control it. I can't get ahead of it. I can't get around it. I can't figure out what this all means. And I'm thinking, I've just told my wife that I'm not going to get this. I got Hans Corell on the line, who's walking downstairs to announce to the world that I've just been appointed the chief prosecutor by the Secretary General of the United Nations. What do I say? Because he's, if it's no, then it's a huge problem. So I said, I will do it. Then he says, thank you so much. We'll talk later. Click. So I called the State Department and said, by the way, do you know? And there's this pause at the other end. And you could hear people running down the hallway, probably to tell Colin Powell, oh, by the way. And so it was just really a funny way to do this. But again, I tell you this because there's nothing magical about international criminal law, international law. We're not anointed somewhere, and Robert Jackson was not anointed, and all the wonderful young people that worked for him weren't anointed, and all the wonderful young people that worked for me weren't anointed. We just were a bunch of American lawyers and investigators and paralegals and secretaries and assistants and what have you, and translators who just got asked to go do something extraordinary and step forward. And that's really what Americans do. We step forward when the line is drawn. And that's what I did, and I moved forward with an incredible adventure when the highs were very high and the lows were very low. So, here we are. We're about ready to go to West Africa. And throughout this, I'll say we're about ready to go to Nuremberg, because I think that this was the same kind of feelings that Robert Jackson had, the same kind of feelings his people had. In fact, I know this, in fact. I'll tell this story. I maybe tell it too much because I love it. Now, Henry King worked for Robert Jackson at Nuremberg. Young guy, 26 years old, just out of Yale, as I told you. And he went over there, and in 2004, when I was still serving as chief prosecutor, and actually I'll tell you about the special court too. You're probably saying, when is this guy going to tell us about why he was there? But the point is that I want to build up to this because it means something. It's important to set the context of all of this. They flew me back from Sierra Leone, Freetown, Sierra Leone. I had to go back to the United Nations anyway to do some things. But I flew directly from Freetown, Sierra Leone to Cleveland, Ohio, with a drop of about 70 degrees. Kind of like this. And I step off the plane and immediately freeze, but they whisked me off, and I was going to give the Klatsky lecture there at the law school. Well, that evening they had arranged for a nice dinner with me and a couple others, and Henry King, who was now not 26 anymore. He was, I think, about 86. But there he was. I had known him. I had actually introduced him on a panel, but we had never actually commiserated. We had a wonderful evening, and so we were relaxed. I probably was a little too relaxed with jet lag and probably that one glass of white wine too many. But I said, Henry, how did you get through it? Every day, how do you get up in the morning, do what you do, what we're doing, and then go to bed at night, and then have to do and get up and do it again? You know, I thought he was going to give me some moving, go out there and make me proud kind of moment here. But he puts his hand over mine. It's kind of shaking a little bit. Puts his hand on mine. I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be great. You know, it's hush at the table. Like, you know, where is the recorder? This is going to be good. He says, about 2 scotches a night. The people that do this, the people that go over to seek justice for people who have been oppressed, for people who have seen horror beyond imagination, they're just human beings. They're just you. Given an extraordinary opportunity to do justice. So we did go over there. What was I concerned about? I had laid out a prosecutorial plan. I laid out a general strategic plan, how to do this, etc., to prosecute those who bore the greatest responsibility for war crimes, crimes against humanity, in the Civil War that took place in the 1990s. The statistics were horrific. There were over 1.2 million human beings that were murdered, raped, maimed, and mutilated. 3 countries destroyed. And over 5 million human beings internally displaced. That means fleeing their burning homes, fleeing Warren, Pennsylvania, which is completely in flames, and you're the survivors. You have no place to go, but you got to go somewhere. 5 million human beings. And so with that in context, my mandate given to me by the Security Council was to prosecute those for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And so I began to assemble my staff. 20 people from 24 nations from around the world came together, 70 of us in my office, to put together an investigation, to draft indictments, to issue the indictments, to arrest those individuals. It wasn't like in Germany where they were all kind of there. When Robert Jackson arrived in Nuremberg, the army had them, just hand them over. These guys, literally, some of them, were still sitting ministers, presidents, and certainly moving around West Africa in the bush. So we had to figure out a plan to arrest them. That's called Operation Justice. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then to start the process, pretrial motions, get ready for trial, get your witnesses together, go through various pretrial motions and have to go to the appeals chamber because we were doing things for the first time in history, and good defense counsel test that theory, don't they? And so we had to do that as well. And then to go in the courtroom and prosecute. Now my plan was to prosecute with 3 joint trials. There were 3 protagonists, 3 groups that tore that place apart. The infamous Revolutionary United Front. Okay, these are, you may have seen a little bit of them in the movie Blood Diamonds, which I can't watch. These are the ones that hacked and cut and maimed. There was also the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, which was the RUF on steroids. They split off, created themselves, and they were even worse than the RUF. So the Civil War, after about 5 years, it actually intensified. And then you have, on the other side, you have the Civil Defense Force. When the Army failed to stop all of this, a group of militia got together under the auspices of the Assistant Secretary of Defense, Minister of Defense, to protect themselves. And you're probably thinking, well, that's probably what I would do. Society was breaking up. The problem is they did the same thing that the other side was. So the people of Sierra Leone had no place to go. If they were suspected to be a rebel, they were destroyed by the Civil Defense Force. If they were suspected to be in the Civil Defense Force, they were destroyed by the RUF. They could not get out of the grinder. So what I did, because my mission was to prosecute those who bear the greatest responsibility, basically like the charter that Robert Jackson had, top 23. It ended up being 13. I turned a few to work for us, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I indicted 13 of those who bore the greatest responsibility. The top leadership of the Civil Defense Force, the Revolutionary United Front, and the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council. So we were working on this plan. And all of this being done, we're putting all of this together. We're building the new courtroom because it didn't exist. We're bringing our staff together. But let me tell you about the environment there. And this is where we kind of break away from Nuremberg. Germany is Germany. Europe is Europe. Destroyed. A lot of challenges, of course. But in West Africa, this is where the term white man's grave comes from. Because not that the wonderful people of West Africa are particularly adverse to Caucasians from North Carolina, but because of the diseases and the pestilence. And I'm here to tell you, people would ask me, well, what kind of diseases did you have over there? And I say, that's the wrong question. What diseases didn't you have? I could probably have easily answered that. We had things like cholera, typhoid, malaria, hemorrhagic fever. You know, that's the Ebola that you heard in some of these movies and stuff. I mean, just incredible. That's one thing. The things that we always disliked was parasites. We won't go there. I was told that you're probably okay after about 5 years after you come back. And I just passed the 5th year. So if I start looking funny and something comes out of my chest or something, maybe I lied. But the problem is that's a horrific thing. And I tell you these, I digress on these things because, again, I want to bring in the humanness of this. This is my point tonight. And then I want to bring in my other colleagues, the other prosecutors, and talk a little bit about them, and then we'll hopefully have some time for some questions and answers. So it's really important. Well, in 2004, when I came back for Christmas, I wasn't feeling that right. You know, I was okay, but I was like running on 3 cylinders. But I didn't manifest anything. And so finally, my wife, Judy, said, why don't you go see the doctor? And we had a doctor who had experience in tropical diseases. Smart move, Crane. And so I went and I said, look, I'm operating on 3 cylinders. He did some blood work. He goes, yeah, you've got something. I don't even remember the full scientific name of it, but let's just say, as we say in the law, it was a bad thing. And they gave me some pills to kill it. I said, what? Kill what? And so I took these pills, and I immediately felt better. I got up the next morning, and I didn't realize how bad I was until that time. Well, I get up and feel better, and we have New Year's, and I have to go back to Sierra Leone for my last 6 months there. And there's a knock at the door the evening after I left, and Judy answers it, and it's a member from the Fairfax County Public Health Department saying, is it Mr. Crane there? You know, she says, no, he's not here, he's overseas. Oh, he says. He says, well, we just wanted to see if everything's all right. We may have to put him in quarantine. She goes, you missed him. You know, I'm already in Brussels heading down. I didn't know this until later, but they had reported, it's by law, Virginia state law, they had to report whatever I had. Well, these are the kind of challenges you have. And you have 70 people from all over the world who are away from their family, putting together an incredible series of indictments, but are away from their family, challenged by disease, challenged by just the security of the moment. There are a lot of bad guys running around. In those parts of the world, you can buy a brand new AK-47 with 7.62 ammunition for a pack of cigarettes. That's a horrific weapon, and those are very, very dangerous. So my other priority was to make sure that my team, my wonderful team, came together, actually arrived at work every day. Not because of disease, but someone killing them or kidnapping them. I had a big fear during this time frame, and Robert Jackson did not have this fear of someone kidnapping one of my prosecutors, holding them hostages and saying, drop the indictments or we start mailing people back in pieces. It didn't happen because we wanted to they were secure, they lived in secure compounds, and we had a very secure place where we worked and lived. I was under incredible close protection. I had 12 close protection officers, 6 on, 6 off, lots of guns, armored cars, but I was a runner. And so between 4:30 and 5 every morning, we would vary my running routine. And the only way you could be on my detail is if you could run with me while carrying a 9mm. The armored cars were front, behind, and 2 individuals there with very heavy weapons. You get used to it. And I ran every day. And that was important because, again, one of the things that you think about when you're practicing international criminal law, either at Nuremberg or in Sierra Leone or in Cambodia or Rwanda, is that you want to make sure that they are safe, focused, and they have the ability to get home and be with their families. So one of the things that we were doing was, once we got through all of these challenges, I told my people that you're never going to miss a specific moment in your family's lives. And that was very, very important because, again, we're away. We're in some cases 12,000 miles away from home, by yourself. And so I ensured that all my people got home for graduation or whatever the issue may be. And of course, everybody left during the holidays. And then we also had a 30-day holiday in August where the court closed. Very, very critical. All right, all that being said, how did we get people to stay and to work? How do you get a group of individuals who have the dedication to come, who want to do it, but then also have to stay mentally focused, emotionally focused? Our court was built, our indictments were issued, we arrested them all in an Operation Justice, which we can digress in a few minutes. But how do you get them to get up in the morning, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning? You know, these people were literally steeped in blood. They're investigating mass graves. They're talking to witnesses about things that are beyond belief. And so how do you get them to come to work, stay focused, go home and be mentally fit enough to be with their families? And that is the small things. And if you read some of the things about Nuremberg, it was always the small things, the pool parties, the Christmas parties, what have you. And so we did similar things, Halloween parties. I hosted my office for Thanksgiving, many of which had never seen a turkey before. I had turkeys flown in for them so that we could all get together. But how do you stay them focused on a daily basis? We had a thing called Chocolate Monday, and it was a tradition that we did every 3 years. And that was, I walked around every person in my office, be they the people who were cleaning our latrines, to my deputy prosecutor, Sir Desmond de Silva. And I'd walk around and I'd give everybody a piece of chocolate and wish them a good day and have a good week. And how you doing? How's your daughter? She's graduating soon, isn't she? And that allows you to look them right in the eye, and you smile and they smile. And I'm here to tell you, in these environments, Nuremberg, Yugoslavia, Cambodia, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, it's amazing how a smile will make somebody's day. It's priceless. It's the little things. The little things count. Friday nights, amazingly, at Mamba Point, a pizzeria owned by 2 Lebanese brothers made the best damn pizza we've ever had. I'd buy the first round of pizza and beer, and it wasn't mandatory, but come on by and let's just have a good time. Talk about sports, talk about anything but what we were doing. Again, it's the small things that matter. It was the small things that mattered up at Nuremberg. So here's this group of individuals from America, at Nuremberg, America, in Freetown, seeking justice. Well, how do you do that? Well, first thing, what happened? How do you get your arms around an atrocity that's taken place for 10 years? Well, what I did, and it had never been done before, and lawyers in the group will understand this, particularly if you're a former district attorney or a prosecutor, I went out and asked my client, what happened? Kind of a basic thing that I learned at Syracuse University College of Law. What happened? So I literally started what we call a outreach program called the Town Hall Program. And I walked the countryside holding town hall meetings, kind of like this. And I would step right into the crowd and I would talk to them. And how I would do it, of course, you see, you have to understand it. I was in things that people had never seen before, like helicopters. Some of them thought it was an animate object. How do you warm up, get people warmed up to you to tell you horror stories and tell you about what happened? So there would be an advance party. They would say I would be coming and give permission to the local chief, what have you, and that was always granted. But then the blue helmets would come in and ring the landing zone. And there'd be lots of guns. People would start assembling because this thing is coming. And then all of a sudden here comes the American chief prosecutor in a white UN helicopter that lands, and the back comes down, and out walks the thing, this white prosecutor from North Carolina. They've never seen a helicopter, they've never seen me, and in most instances they've never seen a white man, particularly blonde. It's like the day the earth stood still. It's the same effect. Particularly the 50s movie where he lands in the mall. Probably saw it at the Jamestown Theater here, where I come out. They literally shrink back. So from that point on, how do you get them to warm up to you to tell you what took place? What's the gravamen of the offenses here in Pujahun, Port Loko, Kailahun, wherever it may be? Well, the first thing I did is I had right for the kids. Boy, my close protection officers hate that. Like a politician. And I start reaching my hand and I say, hi, how are you? And and they're all rubbing my hands because they've never seen blonde hair. They're just fascinated. I say, how are you? I get down. I always had candy in my pockets. All right. And sometimes the location where I'm speaking was just really down the road, so I always walked as opposed to getting into the armored car. Sometimes I had to go in the armored car. But we'd walk or we'd go there, and then we would pull up to the bar or the town hall meeting. Sometimes it's all blown up, but it's generally a place where they can sit. And I walk in and there's a gasp, because again, he's really here. There's a high table, and there's the district officer and the paramount chief and the local imam or the priest. And Sierra Leone is about 70% Muslim and 30% Christian. And there would be a ceremony. There would be a welcoming by the district officer, by the paramount chief, and I'm sitting up there on the high table. And there'd be a prayer. And everybody would stand. And all the Christians and the Muslims together would say the Muslim common prayer together and the Lord's Prayer. Isn't that something? This wasn't a religious war. Okay? But that also heartened me in the sense of, I said, wow, here are these people who have come through hell are still praying to the same God together and with great respect. That really hit me very hard every time. And finally, they'd get to me. This is about a half-hour process, but they're wonderful speakers. Oral tradition is how they pass on their history. There's nothing in writing. And so after these wonderful speeches of welcome, they turned to speak to me. Of course, first time I did this, and it started getting out, but the first time I did it, I said, thank you very much, got up, walked around. Can I do this? Can I move? Okay, sure. But I went, and I'll do this exactly like I did it in Sierra Leone. Hi, I'm Dave Crane from America in North Carolina, and let me tell you about my family. Because family is every single place related to the criminal indictments. And these were very emotional moments. And let me give you another story. It's important for you to know we did do justice for that. Okay? So this is the flavor of international criminal law. This is the other story. There's no glamour to this whatsoever. Okay? The highs are high, the lows are low. That was a high-low moment. But again, you got out there and learned what the people did. Robert Jackson didn't do that, but I don't think it occurred to him. But I think if he would have been there with me, or I with him, because he would have probably been the chief American prosecutor, and I'd been working for him, because I don't hold myself out to be anything close to this gentleman. But the point is he probably would have done it. He just didn't think about it. That's just the way it wasn't done then. Because he was an American lawyer who deeply cared about his client as well. Also, I think, practically speaking, his case was a paper case. He had like 12 train loads of documentary evidence. I had a binder, a little bit facetious, but I had very little documentary. They didn't write anything down. And so I had to prove it by expert witnesses, by victims. All right? One victim at a time. So I had to figure out what they went through. I wasn't reading about it. There's no history about this at the time. So I went out and looked for him. So I think Robert Jackson would have done the same thing, but he didn't have to. The Germans wrote everything down. Everything. And if you've heard Henry King talk about this, or Ben Ferens, or Whitney Harris, they would just sit there and they would have lists of human beings that were exterminated in various places. Date, time, name, what have you. I mean, it was just literally, all they had to do was put that documentary evidence into the trial record, and they just proving the cases. We had to bring in witnesses from all over Sierra Leone and West Africa to prove our case. Now, an international criminal case, not only is it there's no glamour to it, and there's nothing mythical about it, it's just good, solid lawyering. All right? The same kind of law that you learned in
all right? The same things you see on television. You got facts, you got law, you got elements of a crime, and you start proving it one element at a time. And in some ways, even at the international level, it gets boring. Would you believe it? You know, all of a sudden, the people stop coming. I mean, a few people come, and the press disappears. Because judges, you know this. Even if it's a sensational case, you still got to go one element at a time. And so many of these guys were charged with 11 or 15 counts of various crimes. War crimes, crimes against humanity, such as murder, rape, maiming, mutilation, enslavement, terrorism, sexual slavery, etc. But those are crimes, they're horrific crimes, and I'm not belittling the crimes or the victims. But as a prosecutor, you got to take one charge at a time, one element at a time. You have charts, and you start, who are we going to bring in first, and why, and in what sequence, and why does this do this? And you just start checking the box. That's not glamorous. And they don't make any movies about that. Okay? But that's how you seek justice for that little guy, right? That's how you seek justice for that. And so you do that. And so it's witness in, witness out. Demonstrative evidence in, demonstrative evidence out. Until you just work your way through it, and at the end, a fair and open trial, justice is done. And I have another good news story. They were all convicted as charged and are serving sentences between 45 to 52 years. And you're thinking, what? Did you just... I mean, we put to, frankly, we put to death someone who kills one human being. But these are individuals who killed tens of thousands and did various things to it. Well, at the international level, as an aside, there's no death penalty. So they are sentenced to whatever the trier of fact feels, and they can appeal it, of course, to the appellate chamber. And I'll talk a little bit about the organization just quickly in a minute. But it's hard time. There's no such thing as parole, time out for good behavior, clemency, or what have you. Once the appellate chamber reviews it, make sure that it's appropriate, they are sentenced. And so 52 years is 52 years. So if you're a 35-year-old boy general, a mais assesse, do the numbers here. That's what, 87 years old? Probably life. Okay. So again, the whole point is they were sentenced appropriately. Frankly, I think the sentences are a little too light. But that's the international progressive kind of approach. But there it is. Justice is done. So all of these individuals are prosecuted and found guilty. Now, one of the things that I wanted to leave with the Sierra Leonean people throughout all this process, okay, and then with all this dust swirling around, and with all this pain and suffering, with all of the challenges my people had, their health, their families, just living to the end of the day, security-wise. One of the things, or the three things I told the people of Sierra Leone I wanted them to understand, and that is, the law is fair, no one is above the law, and the rule of law, that's three, is more powerful than the rule of the gun. Just remember those three things. And so that was really, really critical. And so as you moved about Sierra Leone, you kept hammering that point in. And then, of course, towards the end of my 3 years there, as we were wrapping up most of our work other than Charles Taylor, I would talk to him about that. What do you think about that? What's your perspective of that? And some of them would be angry. Some of them say, well, how come he didn't get prosecuted? Or what's going on? I'm confused. Because throughout all this process also, in a land that has no television or radios or roads or any way of getting the word out, in the modern sense, we would send out outreach teams who would actually have, then at the time, VHS tapes with generators and VCRs, where we would literally go around the country showing them the trial. Delayed, but this was their court. It was for and about them. Here's what's going on. All right, so they appreciated that. But we found that they had already found out in most instances what was going on. We have a thing called the talking drum. I don't know how it happens, but in some instances, and many of you who have been in other parts of the world where communication is a challenge, they found out about a particular key thing, about your opening statement, about a closing, about a particular key member that testified. before they even got there. We never could figure it out. But that's okay, as long as we were making sure that their court was working for them and that they felt satisfied with it. Because again, at the end of the day, it's for and about them. Well, the special court was a standard tribunal. And this is the only kind of lecture. It's